Okay, we are now recording. This should last maybe about 45 minutes because I know a couple of you said that you had some other things to go to. And in the beginning, I'm just going to run through for about 15 minutes some points that I want your teams to think about. Then I'm going to have a question basically to ask you related to questions that you have of me or Dr. Sutton related to this beginning of this process. So when we did the first Zoom, we talked about the fact that one of the things that you're doing now this week and into next week is doing this environmental scan. And I did ask those of you who had Dr. Betts, I asked you if you had the book, The Second Machine Age, which we read in my section of 802. And I just want to pull a couple things out of this for your teams to think about what this world is looking like for students and for all of us, no matter what our ages are. And as they point out that you need to understand this concept of general purpose technologies, and they define it really as deep new ideas or technologies that have potential for important impact on many sectors of the economy. So again, when you begin to look at what technology and automation is doing to the development of work in the future, that becomes a very important component for us as educators to think about. So that was one idea. The second idea they brought up, and I want you to think about, is that with this surge in digitalization and the constant new types of phones and tablets and desktops coming out, that what they basically say we need to think about is that really the consequences of this is that really it allows people new ways to acquire knowledge, but also that it allows for the possibility of higher rates of innovation, because knowledge now becomes much more ubiquitous, much more open to all classes within any given society. So that is an important thing I want your teams to think about. And the other thing that they were talking about is this, is that really this idea of recombination or recombining things that already exist really is part of what innovation is all about. So as you think about creativity, you think about innovation, you think about looking at those 10 phases of innovation, and also you think about the design process. This is something, that I think is important about, and I think John Kao, if you're able to watch his video, brings that up, and a couple of the other videos talk about, that distinction between creativity and innovation. So that's another point I want your teams to be looking at. And then finally, again, to look at this is that these types of networks that are beginning to form because of digitalization really allows for the emergence of recombinant innovation. And when you think about, as I understand, Dr. Betts had you guys in my class do that view of the future of what future learning would look like from a technological point of view. And you guys who had me last quarter obviously created learning environments with technology. That still is a very important component of your design principles that you need to think about. Also, I hope you all saw that I did make copies of these slides and you're able to download them. So if you do want copies of these for future reference. Now, the other thing that's important, and this comes from KnowledgeWorks, and I believe this is in your material. One of the things I really want you to look at is these 5 disruptions that they're talking about in light of many of the other things that you're looking at. Obviously, you're seeing that even from the discussions with Otto Scharmer's work in looking at a 4.0 economy, that what's beginning to happen is that there's new ways of how entrepreneurial concepts and startups are are starting to happen, that it's creating and transforming networks that really look at a different flow of money. And so if you begin to think about what Google's doing or what Facebook is doing in relationship to funding schools and new ways of taking information, and utilizing their learnings to help shape the development of schools. Or if you saw, I think it was 2 weeks ago on 60 Minutes, where they were doing the interview with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, talking about that billionaires club that they are creating to get these billionaires to take most of their money and to use it for social good. So this is a major disruption that is happening, and one that you should be thinking about. The other one they talk about from Knowledge Works is this idea of high fidelity living. And really what this talks about now is what we're learning from the neurosciences, and how that now is really beginning to interface with the design of cognitive assistants, where they can help really restructure how we understand what learning is all about. So think about Khan Academy as a beginning of that process, of how Khan Academy can basically be utilized as a way to begin to look at any type of concept, say in mathematics, from very basic addition all the way up to differentiated equations, or deep thinking into philosophical concepts and historical concepts. So that is a way of beginning to deal with this. And now the development of cognitive assistance, that you're starting to see this in K-12 environments, where the data mining actually can create prescriptions for every single kid from an individual point of view of learning, which will have very strong impact in the ways in which we design learning environments down the road. The third one is they call the deinstitutionalize of production. And this becomes very important to think about, because one of the primary roles, whether you start from kindergarten or pre-K all the way through to university, is, okay, how do we prepare people for a workforce? And so what this really begins to talk about is, as you look at present day curriculum, and as you begin to look at what technology and particularly automation is doing, what type of skills need to emerge in terms of exposing all ages to, in order to deal with the new types of work environments that are beginning to emerge throughout the world. So it's something that you need to think about, as you look at all of this material. And then this idea of customizable value webs. And this one becomes also important, and I think you began to play around with it if you looked at MOOCs and things of this nature. But what they talked about, you bring your own device to school, and you even think about a lot of schools still ban kids from bringing their own devices to school because of, our perceptions of what kids do with this stuff, and the control of, firewalls and hacking into material. But still, the more important thing that you need to think about, that they talk about, is create your own school movement. So think about what MOOCs are and what they are doing, and how MIT and Harvard and a lot of these schools now are doing mass MOOCs to any content level in the world that anyone would have access to. So again, the question then is, how will your environment begin to address this idea of create your own school types of movement, and what does that do to institutionalize learning? So it's something, that becomes important. And then finally, this idea of shareable cities, which is kind of an interesting concept. When you think about, if you're working in an urban environment versus a suburban environment to a rural environment, well, one of the things that they begin to talk about is that, particularly when they look at development of modular infrastructures, reorganizing and recombining approaches to regenerate themselves from the ground up, talking about sense of community in cities, etc. And then also small towns, small cities, these become very big disruptors that are starting to take place within societies and particularly within our own, whether it be in the political environment. You can see what's going on, the craziness that's taking place right now, even with disruptions in politics, obviously the economics environment, and now definitely in terms of learning, of which, as you, if you looked at that material, what this then means to you as educators and people who are responsible for whether it be education within in the traditional schooling environment or education within a business. So here's what they're saying is that schools then will take many forms. So the charter school movement is the beginning of that process. The cyber charter school is that, community-based schools. So these are things that we need to think about. Second one is that learners and families will begin to individualize learning playlists. So if you watch Young Zhao's material and what he's talking about, what we need to look at, what does that concept do to the present structure of a schedule within our present schools, whether it be K-12 or even at the university level. And then the other area that they say we need to talk about is whatever these paths, radical personalization will become the norm. And that's something we have to begin to understand. What does that mean? How do we design systems that allows for the personalization of learning that's based upon maybe our different understanding of neurosciences in relationship to learning in terms of how you develop this sense of mindfulness in terms of understanding who I am in order to create a sense of where I want to go instead of a prescribed way of doing these things. So this becomes another issue that your teen should look like. And then this is one that's scary to quite a few educators right now, is that educational jobs will diversify. You're going to see, as these new learning agents begin to emerge, what then happens to traditional sense of what learning is about, who the teacher is, and where learning takes place. So it's an issue that I think you should look at in relationship to your design. And then obviously the digital networks are going to continue to increase, and particularly virtual reality is going to have a major impact on what we're doing. And then also the idea of graphic and virtual communities will take ownership. That's where the MOOCs are going to be very, very powerful ones. And one, if you really want to see the power of a MOOC right now, is Otto Scharmer's MOOC around Theory U coming out of the Presencing Institute under the U Lab. The first time that ran, they had 28,000 people worldwide, and there were physical communities that formed throughout the world that started to interact. And the second time they did the MOOC, they had 48,000 people involved. So it is something that your team should begin to look at. What does it mean to learn outside the walls? And then this last one will be one of the most important ones. So you're all going towards an EDD right now, but in the future, does that concept make sense anymore? So what is emerging now is diverse forms of credentials, certificates, and reputation makers will reflect many different ways in which people can demonstrate understanding. So these are some things that I think are important for you to discuss as you begin to think about what your challenge might be for your team. So again, this is mainstream stuff. Time Magazine looked at 6 technologies that are basically reshaping the classroom. So if you look at these, and this was just last summer, I believe it was, September 12th of 2014, the last one particularly just came up. Think about what 3D printers are going to do with the ability of students to be able to create stuff. from abstract concept into reality. Think about those concepts of textbooks that learn about the students. That really, that's the textbook morphs based upon the student's cognitive style or learning style or interest. So these things are in the mainstream. And the reason I'm bringing these up and want you to think about these is that it's not science fiction. What it is emerging technologies as they impact the nature of what schooling is about. And even in a magazine such as Smithsonian, the last, May of last year, they started talking about a whole section on what is this future going to look like. So take a look at some of the things where bioengineered organs, tissues custom made for patients. There's where your 3D technology, you're beginning to see that. And 74% of American people feel, hey, that's great use of technology. Look at the movement of STEM and STEAM within our schools right now. Take a look at this one. So eventually, we're going to be able to, if any of you were Star Trek fans, and if you remember, there was a Star Trek episode where people morphed into these brains, giant brains, that literally could just communicate with each other and control thought and control movement, etc. Well, there you go. We're starting to think this way. We're starting to look at these concepts. So why I'm taking you through this and why both Dr. Sutton and I feel it's important for you to think about this is that we want you to kind of expand out your thinking and break away from the current reality. And as Ray Kurzweil always points out, is that this technology change is so rapid. So for example, at a personal point of view, I'm debating because I'm going to buy a new TV set. And now, we have 4K out there, and we have ultra high definition, and we have 3D. So the question is, do I want a 2015 model versus 2016 model? Because the stuff changes so rapidly, and because it comes out on the market, it's already obsolete. But what Kurzweil begins to talk about is because of exponential growth, is that what he says eventually, and you are beginning to see this, is the emergence of machine and human being. And if you think that's crazy or it's science fiction, look at prosthetics particularly. Look at how they're doing implants into the human brain now for epileptic seizures, etc. And then again, if you're a Trekker, think of the Borg. So that's the Frankenstein side of this. So again, your team needs to let go of the current reality and allow for the expression of possibilities based upon this material that you're looking at. So as IDEO, and that pamphlet we put out to you, says basically that the thing when you're scoping out the stuff, so you've been looking at Sachs material, you've been looking at the videos, you're listening to what I'm saying and other things that you've done in the past, either in Dr. Betts' course or in my course. The thing that you have to look at is how to balance way out there with too narrow. And so what they highly recommend as you do this is that, again, what your team has to identify your problem. That could, design question is, what type of problem is your team identifying given all of this stuff out there in order to create an environment that people can learn to meet these issues that you're beginning to see through your scope. And then what's the impact that a team wants to have on this problem? So how do you really want to solve this problem? How do you want to go after it? And then what might be the context and the constraints the team might face as you begin to look at this. So as your team is coming up with its challenge, these are the things that you need to keep in mind as you look at that. And so now I'm going to turn my voice off and basically ask you, based off of this, what is your team, what are you starting to begin to find out, about looking at all this material? And I know some of your teams are probably at different levels, but what are you beginning to find out, and what other types of questions might you need myself or Dr. Sutton to answer to help you move forward with this? So the floor is yours. So another way of asking this, are your teams getting close to define your challenge that you're going to do, that you'll get to us by this coming Sunday, or maybe Monday or Tuesday, the latest?
Hello, this is Tanika Young. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm still a bit confused. So I thought tonight, because you just mentioned, will our teams be able to have a decision around what our design will be by as late as next or as early as Sunday or Monday? But I thought we also were deciding which teams we were going to be on tonight.
Right. And as I said, and this is for Dr. Sutton's class, so those of you guys came on, I said in the beginning, and I looked at what she sent you guys. My recommendation, because I know you guys and I've worked with you, is that alternative of moving to 3 teams, which basically split up team 2, took the 3 members of team 2, put them into team 1, 2, and 3. That way, because of the size of the task that you have in front of you, it would allow for a better distribution of work with all the team members.
Okay.
Okay? Does that help you?
Okay. That helped me, and I was on team 2, and I think that's why I was confused, because I saw my name so often.
Yeah, and then if you saw that thing she sent out to you guys today, you're on team 3 now.
Oh, I didn't see today's.
Yeah, she sent out an email out to everybody that had the alternative there and wanted to get feedback from people. Then I took a look at it, and I strongly recommended. Now, again, it's up to you guys. I recommended to do the 3 teams because the amount of work that's going to be involved. So to put that amount of work on 3 people might be a lot.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So others about this, what I'm trying to get from you is, okay, where are you right now in understanding what you need to do, from looking at all that stuff? Or the other thing I could say is, you all know what you need to do.
Dr. Gold, this is Jennifer. Can we kind of, even though we're adding someone to our group, I think we're adding Robert. Is it okay if we kind of pick up with what we did for our project and then run with it and then kind of further that design idea?
Yeah, and I said that, what I said to all of you, and also I've learned that Dr. Betts had you guys do something similar to that. So I said, what you guys did in 802 can serve as the baseline for where you want to go. But what you did in 802 was narrow focus, except I think it might have been team 2, maybe really went out and looked at changing nursing education in general. But what I want you to think about is, you need now to expand out, not just looking at a simple learning environment focused on a particular area with technology. Now the broader question is, you are now exposed to a lot of stuff from futurists from the Wall Street Journal, dealing with the sustainability issues that the Jeffrey Sachs stuff has, and all the stuff that you went through in 800, 625, and 802. So now the question, though, is, what's this team really seeing, this world that your kids or the adults who are living in this, including yourselves, is moving towards? And is the present structure of our schools appropriate for dealing with the realities that all of these issues that you're reading about are posing for us as educators. So I want you to move into a divergent point of view and say, okay, if we can start from scratch, or if we can take now what we see coming, so think about it at the bottom of the U. So what can we let go to let come? That becomes the issue. And how does this process of this information really begin to change the way in which we need to think about structure of learning spaces and environments? So if you look at, so let me give you an example, maybe I'll help a little bit. So if you look at Saxon, when he's talking about population explosion, he's talking about food issues on a worldwide basis. Well, what would happen if, how could you design learning environments, let's say in Southeast Asia, that would deal with some of the issues that he's raising, but would also link kids in affluent countries to help, mitigate these types of issues? That's a way of dealing with it. In the past, we had people, some of the prototypes that emerged were creating the solar learning vans that would work in Africa to help deal with potable water issues and educating people around those issues, and then connecting kids to that. Now, some of you, particularly those of you in my class in 802, what was it? I forget what, maybe I don't remember, the SS, whatever that ship was, putting kids on the boat going over into, I guess, down into Haiti. Originally it was going to go over to Africa. Well, okay, that's an interesting idea. The question is, what challenge, what issue is that dealing with, and how does that change the nature of learning over time, given those disruptors that I just showed you?
Got it. Thank you.
Okay? Others. Just want to make sure you understand what we're both getting you to begin to think about. You got to be as divergent. Do not think about the current reality as much right at this particular point. Think about what these issues are, identify what they are. So if I go back to, let me go back to this slide here. Hang on one second. Let me go back here. Remember when we talked about this one, so you don't want it to be too narrow, but you also don't want to be too broad. So one thing is, you don't want your environment or your prototype trying to solve world hunger, because you're not going to do it. That's not the type of thing we're looking at. But you might be able to deal with maybe creating a school that looks at sustainable agriculture within a particular area. So, for example, Pennsylvania is rural, and has a lot of farmland. So what would happen if you created a learning environment that was intergenerational, that led to the concepts of sustainable farming that would impact, the development of food that was nutritious, that would have some impact on the obesity problem, which really affects every single state of this country. So you see what I'm getting at? Hopefully. And then those of you in the university level, the question there is particularly, think about, when you talk about diversified learning and you begin to talk about MOOCs, and then you begin to look at the economics of what it's costing to go to colleges today in terms of debt, then tie that into that one disruptor about credentialing. So, okay, there might be an interesting problem there that creates a challenge for you in order to then begin to think about how you would redesign higher education and maybe how it would interface with traditional, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids in what we call high school. So, give me some feedback. Does that, again, we're stretching your thinking on this. This is what the creativity part of this is, and then what you will do in terms of developing your prototype, particularly if you think about those of you who are in 802 in my class, how you pull that together in terms of a very narrow focus. And what I'm gathering from Dr. Betts' class is that you did both a written component of your design from your team and also did either a Prezi or visualized it to a certain extent. So all you're going to do is, if you choose to take those, but again, I want you to expand based upon the material that you've been given to look at a broader view of what learning needs to be in the future in order to, really come up with some different approaches to maybe how we organize people to learn.
I think once we talk with our groups and start bouncing ideas off of each other, it'll not make more sense, but it'll be easier for us to have comments.
I think that is true. I just want to make sure that all of you understand the context for that discussion. So what I've given you tonight and these other things, that's what you draw upon. As long as you understand that, and once we get your challenge statement, then bingo, then we can start giving you a lot of feedback. And other people can give you feedback. Okay? Who made that statement? Because I didn't see your name pop up.
Sorry, that was Jennifer.
Oh, okay, good. That's all right. So, yeah, right. So that's good. So you actually, that's what it is. All I'm trying to make sure is that at least you understand the context. Because if you understand the context, then when your team gets together, at least then you say, oh, wow, I think this is what he means. But then you can go for it and, and create a challenge statement. And I did give you challenge statements from your past cohorts in that manual, that little handbook we put together. So there are several challenge statements there that other teams brought up. So all that stuff's there for you. Okay, so.
Dr. Go, one quick question. Is there something due this Sunday?
What I'm asking for you to send to me, if you're in my class and if you're in Dr. Sutton's class, either by Sunday or Monday, what your challenge statement is coming out of the team right now. And you just email those to us. You don't upload them to Blackboard. Now, if your team needs a couple of days, 2 or 3 more days, because now you got a sense of what you have to do, just let us know, and that'll probably be okay. But the sooner you get your challenge statement to us, then we can give you feedback and get you moving into the next phases in week 3 and 4. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Right. So you're not uploading this to Blackboard, you're emailing these to us. Okay, so I'm going to make the assumption that most of you are totally confused, but you got it.
Perfect.
Now I understand because Dudley's smiling, man. So I know we're in good shape. So, okay, so that's it. Now, as you process this, and again, this will be available on my YouTube. We'll send the link out just in case you want to torture yourselves again and listening to it, you can listen to it again, just, to help guide you through the process. But it's not as difficult as you think it is, but it's challenging from the point of view that I really want you to stretch beyond, your typical thinking about what schools need to be, et cetera. But again, I think those of you I think it was Team 2, was it? Original Team 2 that was putting together Changing Nursing Education. That was kind of a very unique one in what you guys were doing in really breaking it down and changing the whole structure of what roles were in there. So that was sort of on the way. Now, if you want to move that into medical education for doctors, that might be interesting to see what happens. Or nurse practitioners, or come up with a whole new type of credentialing, that might be interesting too. Okay? So with that, I'm going to stop the recording. And if you do not have